Welcome to a Community Partners special interview where we explore the organization's opportunities and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Sean Pickard, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Adrienne Patterson. Adrienne is the spokesperson for Ire on the Brain, presented by BIST and Tangled Arts, and has been an Ontario educator for many years as a teacher and administrator. Her specialization is in special education, and in the course of her work, she was assaulted repeatedly over a period of time by special needs students and sustained injuries. For the last decade, Adrienne has been on an extensive healing and recovery journey through traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder sustained in the workplace. Through all of these challenges, she has gained a great deal of insight into how difficult recovery can be and what enormous resilience, dedication, work, and support it takes to achieve even small gains. Adrienne, happy to have you back. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Sean. It's great to be here again.
Oh, it's great to have you back in the saddle again, shall we say. But let's talk a little bit about the Art on the Brain experience. I didn't get a chance to get out to it. Fill in some blanks for me. Overall, what are your thoughts? What happened? We'll get into details about it later. How was the event?
The event was successful, especially the launch party. There was 75 people there, and many of the people that were there weren't just the artists themselves. Many of the artists this year brought their family members or their caregivers or their friends. And I guess one of the biggest surprises for the staff at BIST was seeing how excited family members or caregivers were to see the person they came to support's art in a gallery display like that. For many of the caregivers and families, they had never seen their loved one's art before. And to see it in a gallery setting was really exciting. So I think that was probably one of the highlights of the entire show was the launch event, because there were so many people there really absorbing and enjoying it and talking about the art.
You know what? That sounds like a really unique experience because, well, what are the chances of the average person getting a piece of art in a gallery? It's a really, really difficult thing to do. So to be there to see, your person in a gallery setting, that's got to be, touching for a lot of people.
Yeah, it was. And for myself, when I went to the launch event, I was there on my own, but I did that intentionally because I wanted to observe the whole display of art, but also all the people that were coming and interacting with it. And it was a bit of a small space, so people had to shift in and shift out. So it was very interesting to see how people navigated that and how everyone was clamoring to see the art and really talk about it. It was very fascinating. It was a fascinating moment in that many of the people who came to observe the art show were asking a lot of the different artists questions, not just their loved one. So it was really a very community-oriented activity, the launch party, as well as all of the artists creating it in community. So it was a very, very poignant event to be at, for sure.
It sounds like it definitely touched a lot of people.
Yep.
Now, I'm sure there was a host of media types there, as in, some people did sculpture, some people did painting. Is there anything that really stood out to you, or was there one thing that more people did than others? There was a lot going on there. Let's be honest, Adrienne. There's, so many people around and talking, kind of a chaotic event. But what stood out to you through all of it?
I think the diversity and the fact that the art had to be displayed on these shelves. So we were limited by size, which really was difficult for some artists, but also is what I think made it more magical, because people had to really push their own boundaries and their own thought processes. So to see how people navigated that journey was very interesting. And I think that's how we ended up with a wider variety of media than I saw represented last year. So there was, for example, there was set up on an iPad, an audio video display to hear someone's story, and they generated some of their art within the photographs. And there was headphones there to listen to the story. So that was kind of fascinating to be able to hear more about what was in the artist's brain as they were conceiving of this project, and then to be able to actually consume the product that they created, which was mostly audio, but with some video pictures that went along with it. So I thought that was a really interesting take on how to share their story and their art in a really unique way. I had mentioned before, the somatic group activity, and people made basically brain parts. So they look like neurons or the synapses and the bundles that are in the brain. And they all came out so very different, even though most people used paper and yarn. But a lot of people used different embellishments and or did it in a different shape. So they're all very unique. It almost didn't look like it was a community event. That's how diverse they were. There was photographs, there was canvas and art painting. I did the paper mache 3D version. There was an artist that really challenged herself. She'd never done any collages or anything, so she made a somewhat three-dimensional art piece utilizing collage, and then did an interesting display of how she set it up. Almost like a book stand is almost how it ended up looking. And she was so excited that she had tried something new and how well it turned out. Visually, it was very appealing. You were really drawn to it because of the textures and the shapes that she used and how three-dimensional it became. And it was just paper. So it was, there was just so much art there to consume and in such small spaces. So it was almost overwhelming, but that's what made it almost like a scavenger hunt. You really had to slow yourself down and pay attention to each box so that you could take a look at the art that was within it.
You know, the title is making a lot more sense to me now. The theme, I guess I should say, not the title, but boxing in, breaking out, becoming beautiful. I mean, boxing, you've got a rather small space to display your artwork, what it is. Yet what you're displaying allows you to break out and, become beautiful in your own way because everyone's individual, right? You were talking about folks making parts of the brain and they all look completely different, even though it was a group activity. So this whole boxing in, breaking out, becoming beautiful is making a lot more sense to me now, Adrienne. And to you, what does boxing in, breaking out, becoming beautiful mean?
I think a lot of it is indicative. I think we came up with the title because it represents what someone who has acquired a brain injury has to go through. Although they aren't three distinct phases, you can still think about them in that way, in that at injury and when things are the worst, before you're really getting treatment or really understanding what's happening to yourself, you feel really boxed in and isolated, and your life is just not the same. So it feels very oppressive, very dark, very scary, and you feel hemmed in because you can't do what you used to do pre-injury. And then the breaking out is when healing is beginning to happen, whether it's treatment or whether it's art or whether a person's had rest. There are so many different ways that are successful in helping to heal the brain. It's quite a long phase, and frankly, I think we all stay in that phase, but the becoming beautiful is the different part. So the breaking out represents the journey out of that box, out of that isolation, out of that dark, dreary, scariness, to start to heal, to start to challenge yourself, and to find, I call it finding the new groove, because you still in many ways are the same person as you were before you were injured and or acquired a brain injury, depending on the mechanism of injury. And yet so much changes in how you're able to interrelate and interface with the world, both physically, psychologically, and even just mentally in your thinking processes, because it does change. So that whole breaking out phase can be a very long phase, but it is where you, at least in my experience, is where I began to start to feel more of the hope and the light, which is why for mine, I represented it as an egg. It's like when a butterfly is starting to come out of the pupa, it's a very messy, yucky process, but yet look what comes out. So then therefore the becoming beautiful is the healed brain. And although it will forever be changed, and often many brain injury survivors still have lots of challenges, that is still a phase when you start to realize that the healing that you've gone through has stabilized and that you have learned new ways of interfacing with your community and maybe even gotten a new skill. I call my ability to do art now my gift of my injury, because I didn't do this prior to my brain injury. I would say I was creative and dabbled and played, but I would not have called myself an artist by any stretch of the imagination. And it truly is a gift that opened up out of this not so fun journey. So that's what the becoming beautiful part is recognizing that you're new and you're different, and yet look at me go. I can still thrive even as someone with a disability and an injury.
That is a thing of beauty, Adrienne. That is a thing of beauty. Still being able to thrive as an individual with a disability. And I mean, for me, honestly, it's a little different. I look at the breakout stage. You're right. It's something you're in constantly. But is the becoming beautiful something that just pops up every now and then? You go back to breaking out? Or, I guess it would be different for every person. So
I think it's different for every person. But the way I see it, at least in my journey, is if I don't keep up with all of those, I call them the management skills, all the things that I need to do to make sure that I have rest, that I'm hydrated, that I'm doing things that do bring me meaning, that I am socializing, but that I'm also honoring what my body needs when my body needs it. Because if I don't do that, I very easily can slide back to how it felt in the boxing in phase and or in that breaking out phase when things are messy. So brain injuries are very tricky. You really have to keep up with all the protocols and all the things that you do to stay stable and well. Otherwise, you can cycle through some of the other phases once again. But I think once again, that's where the hope is even though I can have a bad day or feel like I'm thrown back to the beginning, I'm not. I am definitely way better off than I was at the injury phase and the boxing in initial phase. Now I would say it's just the effort goes into making sure I don't slide all the way back there.
And it's easy to do that. Very, very easy to do that. But let's talk about a couple of the artists, right? You mentioned someone had an iPad with some visual stuff on it while they were telling their story. You also talked about a person who had never done any collage work before and really kind of found a new home, found a new calling, shall we say. So did those artists break out a little bit? What was going on with them? I mean, families were talking to everyone. It sounds like it was a really, really good event for getting people out of their comfort zone, meeting new people.
Yes, it was. It was very challenging. And there is one example on the flip side of that. One artist found it so challenging to try to conceive of something that would fit in the space that we had allotted that was really, really afraid they couldn't participate. And they reached out to one of the staff at BIST and they were able to say, why don't we instead take photographs of much of the beautiful art you have created in your journey and display that. So the accessibility of this type of art show is incredible, that even when someone was stumped and almost ready to give up and not be part of it at all, was still able to find, with support, a rhythm and a method to share what they've created and what's meaningful to them. The collage person loved it so much. I think she almost got a little bit obsessed, and I mean that in all greatness, because there was actually a second piece that she created, almost like I'll almost call it like an old Rolodex, old file of facts, where it was on a circle where she made many collages and attached them so that you could spin it and look at all these different pieces and different collages that she created. So I think the challenge for most artists, although it may have been frustrating, challenging, and a little bit scary and daunting to have to do things in a new way, I think all artists probably broke out in this particular display because we were forced to think differently. And that is exactly how the brain heals. We need to challenge it a little bit so that you can grow. So I would say all artists broke out.
I love that. All artists broke out, and the fact that people can find new things. And there's a couple people there that had more than one piece. So that's really unique. You get to really show a lot more of that person when you can have that collage or that more than one piece on the Rolodex type thing. So, like it. I like it. And we were chatting a little bit as well recently about what art can do for the brain to help you heal, things like that. We spoke about it a little bit last time too. But while people were looking around, I don't know if you heard any of this because this would be one of those, offhand comments, not a public statement so much, but there was a lot of different art there, a lot of different people presenting different things. Your knowledge, did anyone come up and look at a piece of art and go, what is that? How do I do it? I want to try that. Did any of that happen?
It did, and I'll just use an experience I had myself. As I was there, I ended up speaking to one of the other artists because it was her piece that I thought was really fascinating to me. I think I mentioned it in our last interview. It was a box, and she drew a picture of herself as if she were inside the box, and it was just sketched with pen. And the detail that was utilized to draw this on the inside of a box, for one thing, blows my mind. I don't know how I'd even physically get the dexterity to do that, but it was such an incredible piece of sketching that it looked lifelike inside the box, even though it was just a pen drawing. So I was complimenting hers and asking her about her process. And she said, well, which one's yours? So I pointed mine out. And that's when she was like, well, how did you do yours? So I was able to tell her my process of paper mache, which is a little bit different than maybe some people are accustomed to when you make paper mache. So she thought that was pretty cool. And she thought, oh, maybe I can try something like that. So I do think that happens a lot with a lot of the artists. And as you said, you'd almost need to be a fly on the wall to be able to hear all of the conversations that were had. But it was exciting to see artists speaking to one another, family members speaking to them, and just even the level of commitment. I'm going off script here, but I really feel like this is important to share right now. Is it was so poignant to know that people were so committed to their fellow artists that one of the member of BIST who passed away earlier this year, some of the friends within that same group brought their piece of artwork to display in honor of them. And it just reflected so much how BIST really supports the coming together in making of art and the community, and how much that resonates to the point that someone would care so much about another member that they would even posthumously bring their piece of art to still be shared to illuminate that they've become beautiful in another way and their art lives on. So I thought that was just such a poignant example that was given to me by one of the staff at BIST, that they had observed this happening. That to me just sums up that whole exhibit for me personally.
That shows a lot of community. That's a huge connection amongst the members when they, bring out someone else's art to make sure it is part of it. That is an awesome story.
Yeah.
And let's talk creation stories for a minute. Now, I know you were talking with one artist and learning about, their process and things like that. But did you talk to anyone who said, no, the reason I did this is because of ... right? What story stood out to you as someone saying, I did this because this is what happened to me, or this is what I see, or what creation story stood out for you?
That one's stumping me a little because I'm trying to think.
There's so many good ones, I'm sure, Adrienne.
Yeah, there are. There was such a wide variety that I'm not sure if I actually, yes. Okay, so now what's popping into my head? There was a gentleman that it was a series of photographs from different perspectives in the urban environment, that as he's out walking and for his health and to get fresh air, he takes this camera along with him as an interest piece. But the pictures were taken from very interesting perspectives. And then so as an example, one, I could tell he was lying down and looking up at a really tall building to get that perspective of the building. And then in the display of these series of photographs, little pieces of the narrative of his story was interjected with it. So the hardness of the surfaces represented to him how difficult some of the pieces of healing a brain injury were. And I can't remember all the rest of the story, but I thought that that was a fascinating way of tying in his journey with photography, because that's also what he does as part of his healing. So I thought it was a very full circle, interesting piece. And the way it was laid out definitely told that story. So it was almost like a picture book, but flat and within this box in the art gallery. So I guess that's one that, although I didn't speak to the artist, I can see by looking at the art and appreciating his art why he would have done that, because he shared that in the narrative piece of the story.
That is a unique piece. That I want to see that one now, right? That's telling the story while healing. That is awesome. Like, yeah, good stuff with that one.
Yeah.
Now, Art on the Brain, good show. A lot of people, a lot of families, a lot of first-time artists getting experience they never thought they had or never thought they would have. But what is the one thing everyone needs to know about Art on the Brain?
I'm actually going to do a direct quote from Candace, the director. She said, "Many of our artists really valued exhibiting alongside other survivors. That sense of community can't be overstated. And for our amateur artists, art has been such a wonderful way to express themselves and find more connection in life."
I like that. Find more connection in life.
Yeah.
That's some pretty deep words there.
Yeah. Which I think really speaks again to that breaking out and becoming beautiful, being boxed in, and lack of connection and isolation that often happens, especially in those initial stages when the brain is so sick and damaged and really needs help. It's just such a visceral, difficult position to be in, because you do lose connections. No matter how hard you try in healing a brain injury, you do lose connections. And it's so amazing to see that an art show like this can help survivors of all ranges and abilities of not only the art, but also in their healing journey. Everyone can have equal access, and everyone can create, and everyone can have a product in the end. But ultimately, what it does is bring community together, and you realize that we're not all so different after all.
We're all people. That's the way I like to look at it. We're all people.
Yeah.
Now, there was a lot on the go, right? Art on the Brain at Tangled Arts, presented by BIST, or in conjunction with Tangled Arts, I should say, presented by BIST in conjunction with Tangled Arts. But if you had an opportunity to thank some people and sponsors, who would you like to tip a hat to?
Well, there were a variety of sponsors, and it's very interesting, actually, behind the scenes of organizing for the event, which is, I was on the organizing committee this year as well, and to see that many of the sponsors are actually involved in helping this show come together, not just financially. Some of them are actually on the organizing committee and or have connections to many of these businesses and organizations that sponsor it. So I will tip the hat to PIA Law, Bridgepoint Financial, Gluckstein Law, and I hope I'm saying this appropriately, Iacobelli Law Firm, and Bayshore, and Accessible Daily Living, Mind Connections Neurological Rehabilitation, Neural Rehabilitation Group, Singer Quinter, Rehab First, and OT and Company. So there were a number of financial sponsors, and there was also, oh dear, this is where my brain injury starts to show a glitch. The sponsoring of the food, the people that provided the food was very good, and BIST often uses them because they do such a great job at making the food and donating parts of that. So I'm really sorry to the business that did that, and I forgot your name. But the food was yummy.
The food was awesome. We'll go with that. Hopefully they will take that. But we're coming to the end of our time here, Adrienne. Would you care to say goodbye to the folks at home? Any final thoughts?
Just to challenge everyone that creativity really helps anyone, whether you have a brain injury or not. Creativity and coming together with other people to make things, to talk about things, to build things is just so healing, not only for your own brain and for your own soul and feelings, but it is so important to come into community with one another. So I just want to challenge everyone to be creative And maybe next year, more people will be able to come out and see art on the brain. And, or if you've experienced a brain injury, please reach out to BIST, the Brain Injury Society of Toronto. They are a wonderful, really small, connected group of people that at their core help people who have acquired a brain injury. And it's a great group to belong to and to be part of. So please either become an artist or make sure you support the artists at the Art on the Brain show. And goodbye to all of the listeners out there. Thanks for this opportunity. And thank you, Sean, and Accessible. Oh dear, there's my brain glitch again. I want to make sure I get the name. Voices for Ability. There we go. Thank you, Voices for Ability, for this opportunity to be interviewed and talk about something that's a good passion, the art, the brain, and coming together.
Creative community healing. I like that one, Adrienne. We should go somewhere with that. Do something. That's a good one.
We should.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Adrienne Patterson, spokesperson for Art on the Brain, presented by BIST and Tangled Arts. I'm Sean Pickard. Until next time, bye for now, everybody.